All right, so kicking it off, welcome everybody to what we like to affectionately call the ultimate uh, MSP Business Impact Analysis Workshop. Um, Jerry, I have to tell you, this is something that's a long time coming. And the reason I'm mentioning you is you said something probably about 3 months ago when you were on the cyber call. When we had you on talking about BIAs and we were starting to talk about business continuity planning. And I'm going to do my best to quote you. It's going to be a paraphrase, but you said something to the effect of, in your years doing, federal work as a CISO, this was something, table stakes for you. And then you came into the MSP world and really didn't see it much. However, you see business continuity plans, DR plans everywhere. And you said it's kind of like the cart before the horse. Am I close to what you saw coming into the space 3-4 years ago?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just to preface out there, I'm getting over a cold, so if you guys see me like go on mute real quick and choke, that's just so you don't have to hear me cough. But yeah, you did a great job paraphrasing it. Basically, what I was seeing was that folks were going and working with their clients with all the best intentions in the world, of course, and their goal and their intent was to help them put together these BCP or BCDR plans, and they were effectively saying, here's how we're going to get you back up and running and the timeline we're going to do it. And I thought, well, how are you doing that? Because you don't know anything about the business critical aspects of their organization. So I really felt like it was one of those things where it was, again, great intention. But if you ever had to enact that BCDR, your client's probably going to be unhappy when you're not able to perform and meet those kind of established, agreed upon requirements. And I don't think from a relationship perspective that was going to benefit anyone.
Yeah, it's interesting because for years, Chris Lair from Solace, who does a ton of IR work in our space, has been saying in essence the same thing. And so this is not a shot, as you said, Jerry, at any MSP out there that isn't doing it. And if you are doing it, believe me, you are in the small minority. So kudos to you. But we really felt this was something that, based on feedback, it was time that we do this, and hopefully we'll do more of this and make this an ongoing thing. By the way, once I hand this over to Brian, Ryan, and Jerry, I will put the link back in. We do have a template available that you can follow along, you can brand, etc., and that's courtesy of Brian Blakely. All right, so agenda. I'm going to first give you guys a top 8 reasons why your MSP should conduct BIAs. From there, I'll do a quick intro of the team here. I'll hand it over to them. They'll go through the actual workshop. All I ask at the end is if we can give you just a quick few-minute overview of what's new for Write a Boom this coming year. We completely revamped how we are going to do the event, and the people on the event you're seeing today are the presenters that you'll see at Write a Boom and have done phenomenal work over the years for us. And I know. Jerry, I'm excited about your main stage this year. It's going to be awesome on building the CISO practice. And then next week, we have over 500 of you already registered for, speaking of Chris Lair, a webinar on modernizing IR planning, which, again, Jerry, BIA is a precursor to having good IR planning. Is that a fair statement as well?
It is.
Yeah. All right, so here are my top 8. I shouldn't say my, but based on what I've researched, et cetera, and for MSPs specifically. And Jerry, you kind of pointed out number 1 is if we're going to have good continuity planning, we probably need to know what critical systems and data and where that is for our clients. The other thing, as we have these conversations, and this is why I'm most excited about this, is listening to the role play of how Brian and Ryan asked questions, and Jerry was kind enough to be the MSP in this case of who will come out of character at times, but really changing the relationship we have with our customers and prospects, talking about the financial and operational impact, not really the technology. And as I mentioned, this is going to allow us to create meaningful IR plans. I think it does wonders in terms of differentiation and building client trust. As far as things that are near and dear to our hearts is opening up pocketbooks. and prioritizing where they invest both their time, energy, and financial resources. Obviously, we have compliance and industry regulations. So this, for example, if there is an incident, we know with certain regulatory bodies, we are going to have to make sure we comply in certain aspects. Ryan, I know this is something all of the CISOs have dealt with many times, not necessarily personally, but in helping others. Whether it has to do with healthcare or financial, etc. This is really, really critical that your customers know about those timeframes for reporting. Certainly, this is going to change client downtime in the of event. And again, like I said, we could bring on folks like Chris Lair, and they will tell you firsthand how critical it is to understand a BIA and what comes up first and why and where. And then most importantly for MS, I shouldn't say most importantly, but what's again near and dear to our heart is driving more MRR. So that's a nice byproduct of this whole thing. All right, so our intros. So my name's Andrew Morgan. I'm the founder of Write a Boom, and have the privilege today to sit with three amazing people that I would consider friends, and also great thought leaders and CISO. So Brian, let me start off with you in that order, and I'll let you share a little about yourself, and then we'll go down the line.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Andrew. Hey, everybody. Glad to be on here today on the BIA workshop. I go back into the 90s where I came up much through the engineer ranks. In 1999, got that entrepreneurial bug and built, grew, sold, exited several IT managed service provider businesses. Also in my past 4 years as full-time CISO for a fintech company that processed $50 billion a year online. So needless to say, there are always things coming up, and always ways that I had to take what was going on in the security and techie world and communicate that up to leadership and even the board. Most recently, started another firm that focuses on data privacy and fractional DPO services. And again, excited to work through this workshop with this amazing team here. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ryan.
Hey, yeah, you can all hear me? Oh, okay. Okay, I just switched on my audio stuff. Yeah, so many of you know me, former CISO at Datto. Been working with Andrew on Write a Boom for several years. Fell in love with the MSP problem about a decade ago, and just haven't escaped the gravitational pull. Not necessarily looking to, but just happy to share my years of experience through financial services and what I saw during my time working with MSPs on business continuity and disaster recovery at Datto.
Awesome. Jerry.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My background's very different than most people. So I spent nearly 20 years in the federal space, approximately 14, 15, both on active duty and as a Marine Corps contractor, and I was on active duty as a Marine. And then I spent about 7 years in federal healthcare with CMS and HHS. So I've only been with Intiva and in the MSP space for this weekend will be 3 years. So many of you on the call are vastly more proficient in the MSP world than I am. But I'd like to think that I bring a unique perspective of being able to play on billion-dollar contracts and see what great looks like, and then how do we adopt that for the small to medium business where their budget's simply not going to be at that level.
Awesome. Thanks, Jerry. Thanks all you guys for joining. All right, I'll stop my sharing. And Brian, I will hand controls over to you, my friend.
All right. Well, thanks, Andrew. And hello, everyone. Welcome to today's workshop on conducting BIAs, Business Impact Assessment. Andrew, what's the B in BIA again?
I believe it has something to do with some kind of thing we make money about, Brian?
Business, right? Let's put the business back in the B here instead of boring, right? So, but no, I'm excited to dive into this topic. Even though you might see me yawn a little bit, I'm on Pacific time, and you East Coast people get me up really early in the morning, but I always get you back in the afternoons and evenings. But I'm excited to dive into the topic, even if you do see me yawn here and there, because it's one that I feel, from my experience anyway, it's misunderstood, especially in the MSP community. And I'm going to take a little bit of time before we get in the role play, if that's okay with everybody, because I want to apply a lessons learned here. Last week, I jumped into a webinar and I made some assumptions. I forgot kind of where some MSPs are starting. And I kind of jumped into it and started in the middle. And I think I left some people confused. I shared this with Jerry the other day, as I wanted to take a minute and do some BIA foreplay, if you will, right? Let's kind of get into a little bit of the why and that kind of thing, and then we'll move into the role play. But we're all familiar with talking about technology, right? As MSPs, it's our comfort zone, right? It's in our DNA to gravitate and lean towards the comfort zone with its IT and the technology. But today, we're going to shift the focus a bit, right? We're going to look at why the BIA needs to be a business first conversation, not just a technical exercise. The technical stuff's important, but just like we said in the introduction, right? And Jerry made the comment too. It's like, wait a second, how are you doing over here without input from the business, right? So it's not just another technical exercise or something you do, God forbid, to check the compliance box. Okay. So now, why is this important? Well, I think let's start with what the BIA really is. A BIA isn't just a form you fill out or a task you complete because someone told you to, right? It's not just a series of questions that you check off one by one, right? A BIA is a tool. It's a powerful tool, a tool that lets you engage in meaningful conversations with the people who run the business, right? It's an opportunity to connect, to really understand what keeps businesses running, and to uncover through that conversation what's important to them. So again, this isn't about technology. It's about learning the business language, understanding what drives revenue, like Andrew said, and knowing what would happen if something went wrong, right? So does everyone understand what I mean when I say it's a business first conversation? Okay. When we say business first, what I'm talking about, having real open conversations, not just reading off a list of questions, but engaging in meaningful back and forth dialogue that will, if it's done right, and you'll see some of that art form here today, but when it's done right, it reveals the heartbeat of the business. So think of sitting down with someone and asking, what's most important to you? Or what are the things that, if disrupted or screwed up, would hurt your business the most? Okay. This isn't, it isn't about servers or cloud services or software. It's about what those systems enable the business to do. It's about figuring out what those systems, why those systems matter the most to the business, and how they impact things like Andrew said in the beginning, right? Customer satisfaction, revenue, even long-term goals like growing the company or preparing the business for a potential sale. So I hope everybody's tracking with me so far, because based on my experience in BIAs in the trenches, I've probably done north of 50 or so BIAs. I've probably done about the same number of critical business function and critical business process risk assessments, right? The real magic of a BIA, and I hope you see that today, but the real magic of a BIA happens when you start teasing out those critical business functions that might not be obvious at first glance, right? By talking to stakeholders, whether that's the CEO, finance manager, or even the HR person, right? You start to get a sense of what really keeps the wheels turning. Is it the service delivery pipeline that ensures clients are getting what they need on time? Does the business have, like Andrew's had in the one slide, right, regulatory and contractual commitments and obligations? Is it financial processes and functions that keep the cash flowing, right, and bills paid? Or maybe it's the HR systems that keep the team motivated, productive, and paid on time. We all like to be paid on time, right? So these are the conversations that help you see the business from their perspective, right? From the business stakeholders' perspective, and figure out what needs protecting. So this isn't just about having the technical controls in place. It's about knowing which business functions are absolutely critical, the ones that, if interrupted, could cause serious harm to the business. And we've probably all heard, and it's kind of cliche now, is to speak the language of the business, right? And for many MSPs, this is that chance, right? To step outside of the comfort zone, to step outside of the tech world and start learning the language of business, right? It's about understanding what business leaders care about, things like revenue, growth, client retention, and then translating those into IT and security strategies that align and make sense to the business.
So a quick question. I think Jonathan, as you kick it off here, Brian, and get into it, Jonathan had an interesting question about, in today's environment, is it more practical to do a BIA or a cyber insurance questionnaire first? And I'm gonna take a guess at this, but maybe I could ask you and the team, Brian, on the call. But I think it could be based on time constraints. Like if their cyber insurance is coming up for renewal and you haven't done a BIA and you're going to lose your coverage if you don't get this done, one could supersede the other unless you can knock out a BIA really quickly. But love your thoughts on that, Brian.
Yeah, the business is going, at least from my perspective, the business is going to dictate priorities, right? If you're working with an organization, and usually what happens is our cyber risk insurance policy expires tomorrow. We got this thing. Can you look at it? That's going to dictate priority, right? Ideally, I would say in a perfect world, you have these sorts of BIA type of discussions. Maybe it's not called formally a BIA, but scope matters, right? And you start to learn and understand, how the business makes money. You start to understand the risk, right? This is kind of, the BIA is almost like done in tandem with a risk assessment, because a risk assessment targets the things that are important to the business. So in a perfect world, you do risk assessment and BIA up front, and then because you're trying to align IT and security strategies to support the business, right? So you need to know those, but cyber risk insurance may be expiring tomorrow. So,
Ryan, I see you shaking your head pretty emphatically there.
Yeah, I mean, to me, if you think about a BIA and a risk assessment, I view them as two sides of the same coin. Like both of them are exercises you go through to identify and prioritize activities or actions that you need to take to assure the continuity and success of the business. So they're just two sides of the same coin, and you should do them up front, right? And Brian said BIAs is not a technology problem. Technology, unfortunately, is intrinsically coupled with this problem, but you go back to the high level framing that we talk about at Right of Boom, people, process, technology, or your capabilities. Technology supports people and process. A BIA, you're digging into what are the most important critical processes that my people need to do in order for the business to continue to be successful. So the technology equation comes in there because they're supporting those processes. And so, definitely really, really important that you think about the risk assessment and the BIA as something you do early to drive the prioritization of your activities.
Yeah. And Jerry, from the MSP side, I think, in your 3 years there, when you see a conversation-led business first versus tech, I mean, what are the differences in MRR and, level of differentiation between you and another MSP?
Yeah, and to piggyback off of what Ryan and Brian said, because I agree both 100%. Timing is going to be, probably the thing that drives everything, right? But I would also say, look at it from a different perspective. Look at it, because cyber insurance was brought up. Look at it like auto insurance or home insurance. When you go to buy a policy, it's based off the value of whatever's being insured. And, whether it's the price of a car or the value of your home if it burns down, your belongings, etc. It's pretty simple to go price out the right policy when you know how much you need to insure. If you haven't done a BIA, you may have insurance or you may be looking at cyber insurance, but how do you know that the policy that's being quoted to you is effective? If you don't know what the value of your products and your services and your assets are, how do you know that it's adequate coverage? Because the broker told you so? I mean, I wouldn't use that as a measure. And I think for the entirety of today's presentation, I think folks should look at it and ask two different questions. One is, as I go through these things, look at it as you yourself, your MSP. What's important? What questions should I ask? How should I do things? And then how should you be doing it for your clients? Because while the process is the same, obviously the outcomes are different. We have a lot of responsibility and a lot of access to our client systems. So we need to look at our companies just like we would theirs. If we're not good stewards and can't tell you how to protect our own companies, how can we protect someone else's? It's
Great
kind of my
points.
belief.
Yeah.
Great points.
All right, Mr. Blakely.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Good stuff. And again, when we talk about business and we speak their language, you're not just seen as the IT MSP. You're not just seen as the tech guy or the service provider or vendor, right? You become this trusted advisor, a trusted partner. They can't imagine running their business without you because you're having these kinds of discussions. You're helping them protect what matters most to them and their business. And I think that's powerful stuff. That's when you go again from just managing technology and keeping the lights on to actively contributing to business success and business outcomes. So why does all this matter? And I'll wrap up this context thing. I just really, Andrew, thanks for letting me kind of level set here. So we're kind of starting at the beginning before we hit the role play, but we're talking about BIAs. At the end of the day, the goal of a BIA is to protect the business, not just its technology. And Ryan said this just a second ago. It's about identifying and safeguarding the people, right? The humans, right? They do processes and the technology they use that drive revenue and support clients and enable growth. So when you focus on the business aspects, you're going to gain a much clearer picture of where disruptions are going to hurt them the most. This insight allows you to align your IT strategy, again, alignment, right? You want to make sure that your client doesn't have to spend a dollar more than they have to, but at the same time, your IT strategies, your security solutions need to align to the business goals and objectives, right? Directly with the business's most pressing needs, and then mitigating risk where they matter most. So any questions about why and why the B and BIA is business and why the BIA starts with a business conversation?
And Brian, if you don't mind, I'd like to just tack onto what you were saying, just for folks to keep in mind.
For sure.
I've attended a lot of conferences, as probably most of the folks who are joining today. And the number one thing I see is the phones pop out and people want a checklist and they want a template. And Andrew, you were nice enough to link to a template. I really hope folks keep in mind, and I mean this in the politest way possible, the goal here is not to create some cookie cutter process. The goal here is not to give a template that anyone can follow. The point really of today's discussion is to talk about how to get you in the right frame of mind, how to think a certain way, ask certain questions. The template in my mind should be nothing more than a way of documenting whatever data you want to remember and retain and reference later, and to provide consistency so that if you have a team of people doing something for your clients, they're all doing the same thing in a similar way and your clients are getting the same experience. But at the end of the day, I honestly think I could do a BIA with a cocktail napkin as well as a tool or a fancy spreadsheet, because it's not about the spreadsheet, right? The other point I wanted to make was when you brought up your 8 points of why BIAs are important. The last one was growing revenue, right? And we understand that's why businesses exist, regardless of what business you're in. Be careful not to do harm, right? In the goal of jumping out there and offering a new service, a new offering, increasing MRR, ARR, whatever the case is, be cognizant of the fact that if you don't take the time to learn these things and practice on your own MSP and become proficient at it and make sure that the people who are going to do the work for you are proficient at it, you could cause more harm than good. And just, I hope people think about that when, and the dollar signs don't blur, like, their goal of, I'm going to, give me what I need today, and tomorrow I'm launching this offering. Spend a little time and make sure you don't do harm.
Well said. And I think, Jerry, I'm glad you brought those two things up, right? So the template is more of a guideline, right, to follow us along. The reason we're doing this role play is also some of the things you said. It's how the conversation and the questions, and how Brian and Ryan, and again, I know you can do it as well, but you've been kind enough, Jerry, to play the prospect, if you will, or client in this case, and you'll come out of character at times and give perspective. But it's how you ask the questions. That is, if you think about sales, right? I can give somebody, for 25 years of someone in sales, I could tell you, how to lead a sales conversation and give you a checklist of questions. But to your point, it's really about understanding and owning that and having command of that conversation. I think that's really critical. And so doing it on yourself, like, you were talking about, Jerry, is really, really important. So,
Yeah. And again, this isn't a checklist thing. You don't send the client the questionnaire and have them fill it out, right? You lose all the value. And Andrew, something you said about sales, I used to, years ago at one of the MSPs, the salespeople would drag me out there, right, as part of like a sales engineer role or solutions engineer. And then it was just nuts. I'd be sitting there and so embarrassed because they go through the checklist, right? Are you the decision maker? Do you have budget for this? And following the checklist, the person on the other end is just like, oh my gosh, so the same kind of thing here applies. Is this is not a checklist or transactional kind of relationship. It's about having the art of the discussion. And so now what I'll do, perfect timing, I'll set the stage for our BIA role play today. So in today's role play, I'll be leading the business focused part of the BIA conversation with Jerry. Again, Jerry, as Andrew said, he's been gracious enough to take on the role of a decision maker at a fictitious company called IT Resilient. And what we're hoping is that persona and IT Resilient, you as an MSP, you resonate with it. You see yourself a little bit in that persona, right? We didn't go overboard and make it apply to everybody, but you'll kind of see yourself in elements of that fictitious company, IT Resilient. So I'm going to guide the discussion to uncover the business priorities, right? The critical business functions and the impacts that IT Resilient faces. We're going to go beyond the technical talk and get into what really makes the business tick. What makes IT Resilient? We should have thought of a name that rolls off the tongue a little better, maybe next time, Andrew. But IT Resilient makes that business tick. And in some areas of our role play today, we've mentioned this a couple times, but I'm going to break out a character too. I'm going to break out of the role play characters to make a point, right? And I'll be clear when I'm doing that. When I break from my character, I'll call it a teaching moment, if you will. Cool. And after my portion, Ryan's going to jump in to cover the technical side of the BIA. And what I want you to pay attention to is how we transition from business priorities to technical controls. It's not just about spotting technical risk. It's about connecting those risks and the priorities to the real world impacts they have on the business. So hope everybody's with us so far. So let's get into the role play. And as we go through this, think about how you can bring these business first conversations, like Jerry said, back to your own MSP and then back to your clients. Not a checkbox exercise. It's a meaningful way to protect and drive the success of the businesses you serve. So Jerry, you ready to get into some role play action here? All right. Hi, Jerry. Thanks for joining me today. Before we dive into the business impact assessment, we'll talk more about that in a minute. I'd love to hear a little bit about you. Do you mind sharing a bit about your journey, your role at IT Resilient, your background, and how you fit in the organization? Oh, wait a second. Teaching moment. Hold on. So I don't jump right into the BIA, with Jerry. I'm starting this way because it's important to establish rapport. Sometimes as introverts, I'm an introvert, you like to get right to the meat of the technical stuff and that kind of thing. But it's important to establish a rapport and understand who you're talking to. Sometimes you don't have the right person. We'll talk more about that later. But this isn't just a checklist conversation about building a connection, right? It's not transactional, it's relationship. Building a connection, understanding the business from the stakeholder's perspective. And that's how you get these deeper insights that you won't find from like a form, a survey, or a spreadsheet. Okay. Jerry, you mind sharing a little bit about your journey, your role, and your background and how you fit in the org?
Sure. So currently at IT Resilient, I serve as the service delivery manager. Been in this MSP space for give or take about 15 years. Started on the technical side, so cut my teeth as a network engineer, eventually transitioned into various management roles. My current role has me overseeing things like service delivery operations, making sure that we're meeting client expectations. I'd say on a day-to-day basis, I'm going to work really closely with our service desk, any of the centralized services that are providing things like RMM and patch management, backup and recovery, uh, anything from security and network ops, automation, etc. So pretty much touching everything from an operations perspective that is going to drive or impact client satisfaction. And I think my background kind of gives me a unique perspective because the fact that I started on the technical side means I understand the technical challenges, and then I also now understand the business's needs.
Oh, that's great, Jerry. It's clear to me anyway. You have a deep understanding within IT Resilient of both the technical and it sounds like the operational aspects of running your MSP. It's going to be invaluable for what we're trying to get accomplished today. So your role as service manager, correct me if I'm wrong, Jerry, but it sounds critical, especially since you're directly responsible for client success. And with your background, sounds like you're in a really good position to provide insight into the business impacts of IT disruptions, which is exactly what we're focusing on today. So let me break out of character for a minute. I need like a ding or a dong or something like that, but teaching moment here real quick. So notice how I'm connecting Jerry's role back to the purpose of the BIA, right? I'm not just acknowledging his position. I'm setting the stage for how his insights are crucial to understanding the business, right? This is going to help steer the conversation, I think, naturally or organically, right, toward the areas that matter most to the business. So thanks, Jerry. Jerry, I'd like to understand more about your business functions and priorities. Can you tell me a bit about, maybe the major or key business goals that drive your MSP IT Resilient?
Yeah, I think both a combination of what I'm responsible for and overall definitely looking to improve our IT efficiency. We're always trying to reduce technical debt. It's something we acquire along the way that grows, and if we don't take care of it, it's going to get out of hand.
Hmm.
At the same time, obviously, we need to be growing our revenue, so we're looking to acquire additional clients. Best guess, if we could average one new client a month, I think that would be great. We'd also like to long term position ourselves to be acquired. So
Oh,
we've got to have ourselves in a good position so that we're attracted to someone else. We've got some short-term kind of goals we're looking at. We'd like to start a virtual CISO practice, and I think we've kind of adopted that, or at least agreed upon that the CIS framework is going to be the framework that we're going to adopt for ourselves and ultimately our clients.
wow, Jerry. So, thanks for that. That's, great context and background. Now, when you talk about, I think you mentioned reducing technical debt and improving efficiency, right? So what specific areas of your business do you see is most vulnerable to disruption? Where are the highest risks in terms of disruption to the business? And are there any critical processes that, if messed up, if interrupted, would really impact your ability to achieve the stuff you just mentioned, those business goals and objectives?
Yeah, I think there's a couple that stand out, just kind of obvious ones. As an MSP, we're going to have clients that are going to be contacting us either over the phone, email, through portals, things like that. So the ability to continue to deliver service, the last thing that we would want is one, they can't even connect with us, so our phones are down,
Hmm.
or they call in and our ticketing system's down. That would be step one. But then step two, if they are able to get their issues to us, we want to be able to react as quickly as possible. So if our ticketing system doesn't work and we're now having to work out of paper and pen, or we get the ticket in, but then our remote access tools aren't working and we can't actively, fix the problem on that first resolution with the customer, or they're experiencing a problem and they need something to be restored, but the backups and restoration process isn't working. Any of those tools, I think, and services that we rely on, like email and phone, are going to be the most critical for us. We do have a lot of SaaS applications, so we are putting kind of our eggs in the basket of our cloud vendors and hoping that they keep their tools up and running. But not everything can be placed in the cloud, and not everything is with maybe a vendor that's taking the time and money to back up their tools and keep the high availability there like they should.
Brian, question for you. If we can come out of character for a second, how important are stories? So if this is a real role play, a real scenario you're going through, you're asking Jerry these questions, and he shared with you, hey, our service delivery is critical. Would you pull in a CDK scenario here about what happened in the auto industry? Hey, we hear, you're using a cloud platform, can I dig a little bit deeper there with you? Would that be a place where you might go?
Yeah, not just stories in the news, but as MSPs, we work with a lot of different businesses that have close calls and some of that. So you don't need to necessarily use some well-known, because it's always well-known to us, but you talk to a business stakeholder and they're like, I haven't heard of that. What is that? And then you're spending all your time, with the background and the story, but you can share, hey, I talked to a business, or we worked with a business a month ago, very similar to your profile, and they had this other critical business function, or have you thought of this? Or I think contextual, but beware that we're desensitized a little bit, and when we hear a lot of these things that data breach stuff that doesn't hit the mainstreams, especially the SMB business owners and stakeholders, they're a to them, it's like parking, a car alarm going off in a parking lot. They hear it, it's mildly annoying. So I like hey, we work with a company that's about your size, about, similar industry, and this is what they did, or this is what happened to them, or this is what they shared, and provide some wisdom that you can share. And it also resonates a lot more closely. Otherwise, they look to rule themselves out in those big data breaches that everybody hears about. Just not relatable in some instances.
Got it. Go ahead.
Jerry, thanks for sharing all that. I mean, what you shared makes sense, especially since service delivery sounds like it's at the heart of your business. That's again, you gave an excellent example of how understanding the business context is going to help us prioritize our efforts, Jerry. So just a real quick teaching moment here. Jerry, when he shared, the phones and emails, highlighted that disruptions to service delivery, right, could directly affect client satisfaction, revenue, right? You shared that exactly, right? So this tells us that this area needs our focused attention in the BIA. So I'm pointing this out because as MSPs, we need to keep connecting the dots between what we're hearing and the business impact, right? This isn't just about listing out IT systems and cloud services, right? It's about understanding ripple effects, domino effects of disruptions on the business goals that Jerry shared, right? Like revenue growth and as he stated earlier, even M&A positioning. So, okay, Jerry. Now, beyond service delivery, let's talk about some other critical business functions. And Andrew's breaking out of character for a second. This is sometimes where it is nice to kind of bring in, other similar size organizations, context, and stories, because it helps tease out, hey, when we talked to another manufacturer, they said this was important to them. What about you? But it gets them in the mood, right? It keeps them engaged, and also shows that you're relatable and you've done this before, right? So beyond service delivery, Jerry, let's talk about some other business functions like your financial and human resources operations. How do these areas fit into your overall business strategy, and what would be the impact if they were disrupted?
Yeah, good point. Probably something that's not the first thing that comes to mind when I'm dealing with operations teams. I'd say on the finance side, we're also very heavily using SaaS solutions. So again, I feel confident that those solutions will stay up. They have good uptime already. We haven't really had any outages. That being said, if one or more tools did have a short intermittent outage, it's probably not a big deal. Invoices can wait a day to go out if they have to. Your accounts payable, accounts receivable, they can take short downtimes. Vendor payments are usually far enough out there we don't have to worry. As long as we could keep it relatively short duration, couple days, I don't think that those would be as critical as being able to answer a phone or solve a client's problem.
Okay. So a disruption in your financial processes, though, could have a domino effect. It sounds like, right, on your operations, slowing down revenue generation and maybe even damaging relationships with employees and partners, right? So this is a coming out of this a teaching moment. Again, I need a dong or something here, but so this is a prime example of why it's so important to understand the business behind the systems, right? It's not just about keeping a server running, it's about maintaining the flow of cash that keeps the whole operation moving. And I'm emphasizing the business impact here because this is where MSPs, from my experience, often miss the mark, right? It's not enough to know the financial software is critical. We need to understand that without it, the business can't generate invoices, right? Pay its people or bring on new clients, which directly impacts the growth goals. So, Jerry, back to you.
If I could dong the teaching moment here for a second as
100%.
well. I think you bring up a good point, and I think that's something everyone should take into consideration. Like, if we were to say to the group listening, what would be critical to Amazon on Black Friday? I think it's a no-brainer, right? Let's keep the website up, let's keep sales going, etc. If they're a day late in delivery, who cares? Um, and as an MSP, we probably do a fairly good job of identifying our clients and kind of compartmentalizing them as far as industry verticals. We know who our DoD clients are. We know who our fintech type clients are. But what does that mean? Everybody who's in the finance space does not do the same thing, does not use the same tools. So when you keep saying we want to understand the business, I think that's what it really means is we want to understand what is their business, because regardless of the industry vertical they're in, what's going to be critical to them is going to be very specific to what they do and what is the service or product that they deliver. So not just knowing, and again, I'm hoping folks resonate with this, not just knowing that I have 12 clients over there in the finance space. That's not sufficient. And one of the comments or questions out there was like, can you point out when we might do something wrong? I would say that's the first thing you might do wrong. If you don't understand your client, you're potentially giving them bad advice or overlooking things that are critical. They're taking your word as the trusted entity that they've partnered with. And when something goes wrong, if you can't even tell them, if they say, well, I can't ship out my product. Oh, I didn't know you shipped products. Well, that would have been useful, right?
Well, to your point, Jerry, right? And I'll ask Ryan this. Ryan, in your days at like a FactSet, like you could have a 12-person hedge fund doing billions of transactions every day. And, a lot of times as MSPs, we go, it's a 12-employee company. What's the big deal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, it's, at risk of being redundant, like, how are you really assuring the resilience of your customer if you're not sure what types of risks are outside of their tolerance? And that primarily when you talk about that, right, that comes up in the terms of availability, right? Availability of critical systems, right? We're talking about financial transactions, you're talking about order management systems, execution management systems. What are their fail safes and redundancies for those? If you haven't bothered to ask the question and you're just like, here's a server that I manage for you, and you don't know that they're deploying EMS and OMS software on it, and that has a that has a very narrow maintenance window on a Saturday evening, because that's when all the markets across the world are closed, you're gonna miss some critical things for them, right? So it's definitely important that you understand the business they're in and what they're really defining what their risk tolerance is. And that's, as to Brian said, getting to know your customer.
And let me hammer something home, and this is bonus material for everybody. A little bit off topic, but not so much. But knowing your client, I would say, I'm going to go out on a limb here, could be controversial, but I would say you are negligent when you're doing risk assessments if you don't understand and sample as an MSP, your clients sign customer contracts. If you're not sampling those and getting an understanding of the promises that your client makes to their customers, go through those contracts. To Ryan's point, you have a client did this for about 5 or 6 months ago, and you look at the contracts that the client enters into with their customers. They have 15-minute SLA to answer the phone. How important is that? Right? 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, right? We gravitate to servers and systems. Hey, phones are still important to some businesses, right? So understanding the promises that your clients make to their customers and the data security and data privacy and the compliance requirements that are pushed down to them, you are remiss in your risk assessments and understanding the business if you don't understand the promises your clients make to their customers.
Yeah, Ryan, I'll put you back into role play right now, but Tim Golden, who thinks on, he talks about it. I think he was on with us, Jerry, that time, where he was saying, and again, this is, I think, to the question of where can we go wrong. He made, in his early days, he's like, well, I'm sure email is really critical to you. And the client's like, I don't give a damn about email. He goes, my phone systems are down. Now we've got a big problem on our hands. That's business ending type problems. Yeah. So we a lot of times think, because it's we got to, I think, and this is just beyond, this is being good stewards of relationships. We are so myopic sometimes that we think we know what's right and important. So we have to get our own egos out of the way in this.
Yeah, the assumptions will truly make an ass out of you and me, right? Just like the assume does. So back in character here, and I'm about to hand it over to Ryan on the technical side. But so Jerry, how about HR? How about human resources? You mentioned you have key personnel, VCSOs, sales teams, managers. Sounds like they're probably pretty important to the business. What's the impact if HR functions were messed up, if HR functions went offline?
Yeah, I think from a client perspective, it would be low impact. Maybe over time, if it was a very long outage, it would impact clients. It would be a greater impact, obviously, internally to our own employees. The ability, for example, to make sure we're meeting our compliance requirements from a regulatory perspective. The ability to make sure people are getting paid, that their benefits are intact, that they can make changes that they need to in a timely manner. Those would be much more critical. Retaining our staff, having a staff that's happy and doesn't leave us, that could be, a direct impact. So I'd say they're critical, but critical internally more so. Now, if it was out for a long time and we had, people leaving, of course, that's going to impact clients, but that would be probably a very low probability of occurring.
Okay, Jerry. So it's clear HR functions plays a role, somewhat vital role, not just in the day-to-day operations, but in supporting your longer term growth, right? And if these systems were disrupted, it could lead to kind of broader issues that ripple across your entire business. From what I'm hearing, your service delivery, if I could kind of recap, your service delivery, financial operations, and HR functions are all critical to your success. It sounds like each plays a unique role in driving your business goals and in maintaining resilience. So real quick teaching moment. I'm pulling together the threads here, right, to reinforce the point that every critical function Jerry described supports the overall business strategy, right? This approach helps us prioritize, right, the controls and safeguards and that kind of thing that's going to provide the most value to protecting these key areas of the business. So,
Brian, it's interesting when I talk to Chris Lair, though, when he's doing, when some company's down and he's, they're doing the DFR work on it, he says over and over, payroll is often one of the ones that was overlooked so many times. And all of a sudden it becomes one of the most critical things when they're down for a little while, that their employees aren't getting paid. It's interesting.
Morale, culture, all those kinds of things, and trust, right? You start, as an employee, you start to lose trust in your employer's ability to remain solvent. So
one other thing here. So we're obviously in a time constraint, so our role playing is pretty well laid out, right? But I would say, in my experience, and Brian or Ryan, if you disagree, please tell me. I think it'll be highly unlikely that the person you sit down with is going to be able to speak to all aspects of the business. Whoever your primary person is that you engage with, if it's the CFO, is going to easily be able to speak to finance, right? That's their wheelhouse. They'll probably defer you to someone when it comes to IT. But if you're speaking with someone on the operations side who has what they think is a good view of the organization, they're going to relay their perspective. And there's a high likelihood that something will be missed, like an HR system or a finance system, because it's not something that they use or is critical to them every day. So if you do find yourself doing these BIAs, I would highly recommend polling multiple people within the organization, unless you're in one of these organizations where it's one person wearing 4 hats because they're very small, fine. But I would not rely on one person knowing all of these things. And I think if it ever got out that you didn't interview other people, those people would be upset that why wasn't their perspective taken into it. So that would be one of the gotchas I would call out.
100%. Yeah. So we needed to stream through this, but to Jerry's point, you'll run into that. And it's funny, as you talk to people around the business, my experience, egos get involved, and everybody you talk to, they're the most important thing in the whole business that the whole business does. And if what they do doesn't function, the whole business comes crumbling down.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, one of the biggest opportunities with the BIA is the ability for there to be gain alignment across the customer. And so you're, in a way, you're discovering things that maybe not everybody knows. So documenting that in a professional way and bringing that back to them in a deliverable format to say, hey, this is what we found. Did we misunderstand anything? Did we miss anything? And being present there in a conversational style, just to go through and review the output, really gives you an opportunity to become a really strategic part of gaining alignment for them internally. Different people may have differing opinions of the importance of something. And so one of the things you want to be really clear on as an MSP is the value you're providing. You want everyone in that customer that has the ability to affect your future within that customer to be aligned around the value you're providing. And so the ability to communicate and align them on what is found is a really, really essential piece. Like when we, in my career, when I do a BIA, I never progress to contingency plans, disaster recovery plans, business continuity plans until we've actually gone through and said, okay, did we understand the priorities correctly? Did we enumerate all the correct processes? Did we, did we get this metadata right? And until you get an alignment around that, you really shouldn't move on to the kind of secondary stuff that comes off of that.
Yep. And I give you one tip or trick to kind of show that this is real, is when you're working and speaking with your customers, all of these things tie into other things that we're going to do later, right? That everyone's mentioned. I'm not going to regurgitate all that. But one of the ways you can see this is just to go and say, okay, if whoever you're interviewing thinks that they know everything about the business, they're the only one that should speak on behalf of the business, a simple question would be, let's assume that you did a great job backing up all of your systems and you got hit with a massive ransomware attack tomorrow. Everything's encrypted and you have the ability to restore everything. In what order do you restore? And to me, this is where the BIA comes in. If they couldn't answer that, because at that point, everybody's going to be screaming, I have to go first. I'm the most critical. This process will help you identify that. But if the person can't answer that, then they don't have enough information to be able to help you do the BIA. So take whatever information they have, as Brian said, go poll other people, and then get them back into a room together, as some of the folks said in chat, to say, okay, you've all identified these different areas, but now we've kind of got to agree on how everyone can't be a one priority, right? As an MSP, we know that every client thinks every problem is a one. Well, every department will think they're a one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll just real quick too, to what Jerry said, is sometimes when I've done these too, is you're talking to someone and they are the one person that knows everything, right? And that screams business continuity issue too, because now we have a human with no redundancy for that human. And this one person I talk to, man, if they're not available, they're on a plane and unavailable or whatever, on a ventilator and can't speak, everything comes to a halt.
You are assessing people, process, and technology risk with a BIA. You're looking for single points of failure in all of those things.
Yep.
Ryan, as we go to you, I just want to bring up Joe Foose made a point. I'm going to try to make two critical tie-ins here with this. He says HR folks regularly downplay full, PHI, PII, and cloud-based HR platforms. Like, they're in the cloud. They're fine. They're protected, so that's one point I want to make, Brian. Maybe you can tie this together with something in a BIA you've told me you've done in the past about doing it multifaceted, interviewing different people. And I think one of the great lessons you learned was, I think there was this marketing person in a BIA where you're doing it, and then you find out that all of the customer contracts that they only thought were in their ERP system were being uploaded into Salesforce.
The good old DFD. You're doing a data flow diagram with everybody and following the flow of data, and HR data is no exception, where you follow the bouncing ball around, and then you got everybody in the room and you're saying, this is the way I understand the data flows. And then the marketing, we take everything and we export it to fill in the blank marketing application. That's a SaaS that they whipped out a credit card and did, right? So those kinds of things are when you're doing those type of risk assessments, and a data flow diagram can help in some cases with as an input to the BIA. But those are eye-opening, and IT's like, I didn't know, shadow IT, shadow services. I didn't know that the data flowed out of our boundary and into some SaaS app that we haven't vetted through any third-party risk management, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
And Ryan, as you go into systems, have you ever done one where you all of a sudden discover there's multiple of the same apps, and I didn't know they were also using this kind of it? Does that happen as well, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, it's especially common in revenue ops and marketing. Like, there's MarTech stacks tend to be like really, really well known for having high levels of redundancy. And, it's like, well, this works for this type of campaign, but not for this. And before you know it, it's like, one, there's a spend optimization thing here, which in terms of this IT resilient application, right, I think you're putting your CIO hat on, and this MSP is trying to align themselves to be an M&A target. You're going to need to identify and have some rigor around those procurement processes and how you spend and the real business value of those systems. And these insights in the BIA, if you're doing this as a BIA for your customer, you could potentially highlight, hey, I think this might be an area of optimization for you to increase your net revenue, reduce your expenses, right, and potentially change your EBITDA. So,
and shrink your attack surface.
Shrink your attack surface. Like, there's 1,000 benefits, but like, until you actually get into this and start mapping it out, and I think, who was it? Strive IT asked, would a data flow diagram be part of this process or a precursor to it? Hold that thought. We're going to get to that in a second.
Yeah, I'll do it.
My belief is, and Brian has done this with me before, I don't do anything if I can't diagram it. I don't care if it's threat modeling, if it's discussing, when I'm thinking about technology risk and doing risk assessments, if I don't have a picture that we can draw that everybody agrees reflects reality, I can't be sure that we're having the same conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So I think diagramming and mapping things out is incredibly critical. I wouldn't call what I do like, true formal data flow diagramming, but like I'll throw a bunch of components up on a whiteboard and then start to assess it. So I'm actually going to do a little of that with the technical assessment with Jerry, so you guys can actually see what that might look like. So
Cool.
as we've been talking, I've actually been building a diagram in the background.
Okay.
Hopefully this will come across well and you guys will be able to see this.
And then Ryan, let me just kind of do a smooth transfer for our role play Jerry here. And while you're doing that, so Ryan, I'll pass it over to you, right, to take us through the technical parts of the BIA, focusing on how we can understand that, right, the technical to the technology, right, the technical parts and pieces that supports Jerry's critical business functions. So please remember, a business's critical business functions involve humans, right? People doing things, doing processes that use technology, right, to drive those critical business functions. It's all connected. And as we go through this, don't be surprised if I jump in to highlight where some of these technical priorities and technical things Ryan's gonna share align with the business impacts Jerry's shared. We just want to make sure that the controls we discuss aren't just about mitigating IT risks. They're connecting the dots, right? They're about protecting and prioritizing the processes that drive Jerry's business success.
If I could add one other thing from a teaching moment perspective. So there's a lot of good comments, a lot of good things you guys are touching on, and like DFD is one of them. So this is where I think it goes back to, again, knowing not only your customer and their industry and frameworks, but hiring the right people who have that experience. If you understand your customer and you know what industry they're in and what regulatory compliance requirements they might have, some requirements, some frameworks require things like a data flow diagram. So by default, the client should already have something like that they can pull up with you to discuss. If they don't, that's where you can be a good steward to say, to be compliant in your industry, this is something that's needed. We can help you build it. If they do have it, you're already starting from a better place, ideally. Hopefully it's updated. But I think it's those types of things where, unless you have the experience and you're bringing the right people to the table, they may not even know to ask, or they may not even know to say, do you realize that is a requirement? And you guys should have that. So
yeah, if you think the platform is going to solve the problem for you, then you don't understand the technology and you don't understand the problem we're trying to solve, period.
All right, perfect. So let's jump in. All right, can everybody see this diagram?
Oh, yeah.
There you can. Okay, perfect. So we knew a little bit about IT resilience environment before we got in. We knew some about their business goals, and there's some about their pain points, some of their tech stack. We've talked with Jerry, our resident expert at IT Resilient, and we've gotten a sense of the lay of the land. We know that building and delivering the vCISO function, implementing a vCISO practice is really important. It's critical to the success of their business. So that's a critical process that they're trying to stand up. So we're going to want to understand what components relate to that from a people, process, tech perspective. Service delivery appears to be the number one most important thing in terms of the success of IT resilience continued operations. And then there was some discussion around HR systems and the ability to pay people, the ability to attract, retain, up-level talent. Secondarily, we learned that they want to be potentially become an M&A target, and they want to implement a controls framework for CIS controls. There's potentially some overlap between vCISO practices and CIS controls. We haven't really talked about the security stack, but if we have time as we talk about vCISO, we'll get into that. So, Jerry, one of the things I heard when you and Brian were talking was it's absolutely imperative that if a customer needs to reach a member of the help desk, that they can reach you. So I'm wondering, talk to me about the specific people we're talking about and the various processes that rely on these phone calls, or is there is there a single number, or are there multiple numbers? How do customers know how to reach those numbers? And what technology solutions are you using to provide that service today?
Sure. So at a high level, there's one main service desk number that covers all hours, including after hours. Obviously, that goes into a pool with different agents working in different pods. But primarily, there's the option to call into that number, receive a service desk agent who on the back end is going to be using primarily a ConnectWise and Microsoft stack of applications, as well as the ability to email in also through Microsoft tools, email something in that will then automatically create a ticket in the same ConnectWise system.
Okay, so there's a piece of software your agents will use to mark themselves as available for that phone, for that call, correct?
They should, yes.
Okay, and that's an application that sits on their MSP provided endpoints.
I believe so. Now we're going. I believe so.
Yeah. Let's just suspend disbelief for a minute. Okay, so those employees are using software-based phones, or do they actually have physical IP phones?
Software based.
Okay, perfect. So already we learned something important about this environment, and so let me bring the diagram back up. So when Brian and Jerry were talking, originally I assumed that the phones that we were discussing were physical phones, but the truth is they're actually software phones. So that's potentially helpful from a continuity perspective, but we haven't discussed the technology at this point. So Jerry, how long can the phones be offline before you think it starts to impact your SLAs and your critical like customer satisfaction levels and your service delivery success metrics?
I would say if the calls can't be rerouted to other agents within probably less than say 5 minutes, it's going to be a concern. We have SLAs and targets that we want to hit for how long someone sits on hold waiting, and we like to keep that under say 2 minutes. So if all of a sudden our customers were used to having their calls answered in 2 minutes and it jumped to 5 or 10 or 15, I believe it would start impacting client experience. I just don't know to what extent waiting 10 minutes versus 5 would do.
Yeah, Jerry, I'm wondering too, with any of your contracts that you have with your customers and clients, if there's SLAs and penalties if those SLAs aren't met.
Yeah, we do have SLAs as far as at least addressing, picking up the phone, addressing the ticket, assigning it, not necessarily on completion, because each problem is going to be different. But yes, we would have some, agreements where we could either be held financially responsible, have reputational impact, et cetera.
Ryan, how in depth do you get, in terms of, segmentation? And let's just say Jerry's like, well, yeah, phones can't go down. They're critical. Can't even down. Do you start to dig there into, okay.
Yeah. So it's actually the next question I'm going to ask him, which was, when was the last time you had an outage and how long was the outage?
Probably 6 to 12 months ago was the last one, and it was down for roughly an hour.
Okay. And were you able to quantify the impact to your business during that hour?
Somewhat, because email is a separate option. Clients were able to email things in. That's a slower process and not necessarily their preferred method. And then obviously we get client satisfactory feedback as to I waited on hold or the number didn't ring. It showed as being down for some reason, got a busy signal. But how many tickets or how many clients specifically, no.
Okay. And did you happen to get a root cause analysis on that outage?
Yeah, the vendor had a software update. It caused an outage and they had to roll back.
Okay. And did you receive any financial restitution for that outage, or did you take any corrective action with the vendor or change vendors?
Didn't change vendors. No no financial recovery there. And I don't believe that it violated their SLAs for total time down for a month or per year.
Okay, so I'm curious. That outage seems to be longer than your tolerable wait times, and your no longer than 5 minutes. Did you have a plan for what you were going to do if the outage lasted longer?
So we have email as always as a backup. Another plan that we considered was notifying clients through a portal that we're experiencing an outage and to please use email or try back. But right now, email's the primary backup.
Okay, so we'll escape the exercise for a second. One of the things I just did, and the reason I asked the talk to me about your last outage and its impacts question, is we just learned that what he told us as his maximum tolerable downtime is not actually his maximum tolerable downtime. Right? He was actually able to survive an outage that lasted longer, which means we're going to need to dig in more there and really understand where that initial assessment came from. Maybe that's because he has certain SLAs with his customers, that is in a contractual agreement. Maybe that's just it gives him a lot of heartburn and it doesn't make him feel very good. But like that is an area when you're doing an actual BIA and starting to think about what are the controls I need to place around this critical piece of technology and the people that support it. You really need to drill into that, and that's one of the reasons I love asking those talk to me about your last outage questions. And then you'll also notice I asked hey, did you have a contingency plan for what you were going to do? And he's like, well, we told them that they could just use the email. What that tells me is they don't really have a business continuity strategy if there were to be a prolonged outage of their voice system, which means as an MSP, there's an opportunity here for you to dig in. This is an MSP, but I think as you're thinking about if that really is a critical service for you, what is your plan for managing that? Like, we still don't know that the nature of that outage. Maybe it was an issue with the VoIP lines, but the software continued to function. Maybe they easily could have added, help desk folks' mobile phone numbers into the call queue and worked around the issue that way. We're going to need to dig in more there and really understand the art of the possible. We're not going to do that in this exercise, but I think we've done a couple important things here. We've identified the critical people, right? The people that service the help desk. So if we had more time, I would dig into, well, what happens in the VoIP software if no agents are ever available? Does it have some fallback that it always calls this number? It, rings the owner. Like I would dig into that to really understand that. I would dig into, are there other processes that surround voice? Maybe it's really critical for their cold calling processes for prospects, and what the impact is there. That doesn't really relate to service delivery though. So it's, you're potentially probing into, are there other critical areas that didn't come up in the initial conversation that are related? And then certainly trying to triangulate around what is that actual maximum tolerable downtime so we can really start to think about contingency plans.
Ryan, I had two things that popped into my head, which kind of circle back. From Jerry's perspective, in this role play, he's like, service delivery. Jerry's got out of role play. Jerry, you guys got a big MSP. I mean, your phones are down. Correct me if I'm wrong. Huge implication to the revenue side as well, right? 30, 40, 100 salespeople, right? I mean, and customer, you know what I mean? Like, so it's not that's the point also about interviewing multiple people. Fair, we don't have to get in depth into it right now, but
yeah, you're right, and I think again because looking at it through the lens of an MSP, real world, right? Breaking out of this, looking at it from an MSP. If I'm the client, I'm looking at my MSP to say, I've trusted you to provide me a service, keep me secure, keep me up and running, whatever the case is. If you as the MSP can't keep yourself up and the vendors that you work with and partner with can't keep you up and running, how can I trust that you can do for my business what you can't do for yourself? So I don't know, if we really had to dig down deep in this, what the revenue loss would be. Sales maybe isn't as impacted because salespeople may not be just standing by to talk on a phone, right? They're going to schedule some meeting. But I do think from the service delivery side, your clients are going to be saying, I didn't realize I paid to be with an MSP where I have to sit on hold for an hour because their phones are down. If I'm having a critical incident, and then especially we talk security, right? I'm having a security incident. I can't get a hold of anybody for an hour. Who cares what the SLA is? Why do I want to do business with you, right?
Right.
I think that reputational impact is far more relevant, which long term will then lead to those revenue impacts.
And as Gary Peak has said so many times over the years I've known him, Jerry, he doesn't care what, at the end of the day, what your agreement says. Your clients typically have bigger pocketbooks than you would, and if they want to get out of their contract, they're gonna. So that's one point. Ryan, just one other quick question to you. We know as MSPs, we're not attorneys, but Jerry in role play said, when you asked him, did you do anything with the vendor? And he said, no. Is there some point you're going to dig a little bit about their vendor due diligence in this process?
It's possible. I think, again, we're doing an analysis of an MSP right now, but like,
right.
If this were a client, right, and and assuming you do the BA early in the relationship, so this is close to onboarding, right? You're doing some risk discovery of, okay, well, what I just learned is there's potential risk with this VoIP provider. Is it the VoIP provider that I normally bring in, or is it some other VoIP provider that I'm being asked to take over? Because I'm responsible for providing a consistent level of service to that customer, this to me has just thrown a red flag from a risk perspective to say, I need to make a note of this, and I need to circle back on this, because this could be critical to this client's satisfaction with me if I don't adequately address this risk going forward. So it's less about diligence and like going back to the contract and like, carrots and sticks, and more about, okay, there's something there I want to understand more so that I can make sure I'm providing them a high level of service. Because regardless of whether Jerry's, fake Jerry's IT resilient persona is right about his maximum tolerable downtime, the thing he has told you on an emotional level is that he is not okay with prolonged outages of his voice system. Regardless of what the actual business impact is to him or not, that in his head is going to be intrinsically tied to his view of your success. So that's an area that you, providing a service to him, want to get really clear about, so that you can make sure that you're able to meet that. And you can work on, closing the gap with where he is and what reality is over time. But he just gave you a really critical piece of EQ information that you're going to want to pick up on when you're doing this exercise.
Yeah, and just real quick on the vendor risk, Andrew, too, something else that's important to know, the business and business impact, is when you do put together a vendor risk management program or supply chain risk management, you usually tier the vendors out, and you're going to say, hey, this vendor that we're talking about, the phone system, that's tier 1. They're critical to our business. They're critical to our mission. Right, and we're going to give them a higher level of scrutiny and tier 1 kind of treatment in terms of the strip search we're going to do on them to make sure that the controls that we're relying on them work, because this vendor is so critical to the mission, the business, and they're in our data flows.
Yeah. So
one other thing I would just point out real quick is, especially on the vendor side, you're going to have kind of bucketize them: small, medium, large, mature, immature, whatever, however you want to do it, right? The really small vendors you work with, you can try to lean on them for reimbursement or whatever. Not sure that they're even going to be able to reimburse you. The medium ones, maybe that, they're growing and they've got enough that they can help. I won't call any big names out, but I can tell you I have a big name vendor that I work with personally for my home internet. And for the first year that I was living in my home, it was out all the time, 30 minutes here, an hour there. They reimbursed me, to Ryan's point, but they looked at what was my price per day and how many hours was I out, and I got back like $8. So did that reimburse me for what I couldn't work that 2 hours? No. So I don't know that ever really comes. long term, I don't know that that's ever really the strategy to lean on, right?
Yeah, at the end of the day, this vendor either met his needs or it didn't meet his needs. And if it didn't meet his needs, right, like I always, you know, it's unlikely that a singular outage of this vendor is, it could be indicative of a larger problem. That's an area I always look for classes of problems. If there's an outage here, well, now I want to know what's their outage history, what's their SLA uptime guarantees back to this customer. I'm going in to really understand: was this really a one-off event, or is this a class of problem? So there's one other piece of information that Jerry gave me in this exercise that I want to drill into. He told me it's voice over IP software that sits on top of the user's endpoints or desktops. Maybe there's a mobile phone app we don't know yet. We're not going to go into there for this exercise. But let's say he said his security stack used CrowdStrike. And he comes in the morning and and he just said he's a Windows shop, right? Every single one of his employees' workstations is not working. It's bricked. And that means no one's actually able to field that voice number. You actually have a critical dependency now because it's an application on top of the endpoint. Usually you don't have that type of problem with a physical IP phone. So the endpoint and everything around the endpoint's management and uptime and its ability to service the service delivery requirements for those people is now in scope for your BIA analysis of the voice system. So that's where when I'm asking these questions, how do they log in to service that? Oh, it's a voice over IP software. Okay, now that just expanded the scope of the analysis I need to do to understand potential business impacts to this. And then when you're going to go through contingency planning, again, maybe there's like a web portal you can go in and add a mobile phone number and you're fine. Right. But if everybody walks in, they don't have hard phones, everybody's computers are offline because of some bad update. Well, now you have a service delivery issue, right? And not only that, those people now can't service email, which was his backup if the phones went down. So, I don't really think you want your techs there on their mobile phones trying to answer complicated IT questions on their phones, right? So there's a couple layers here that, again, if we had time, I would have dug into. I do want to dig into the other half of this, though, which is something Jerry said, which was the ticketing system uptime. And I think this is also going to bring in the HR side of this too. So, Jerry, tell me a little bit about your ticketing system and how your techs are using that at a high level from a service delivery perspective, and any important SLAs you have around ticket management, time to field, time to resolve, anything like that. Just give me a broad sense of that system in terms of service delivery.
Yeah, just at a high level, real quick, because I know we're short on time here, and I know Andrew's plugging away. The tickets are going to be generated. They're going to be triaged and routed. The goal is to meet an SLA to get it into the right team's bucket in a certain amount of time so that someone's at least putting eyes on it. So the main goal is to either resolve the problem right there on the phone so that you don't even have to send it to a person in another team, or get the data captured as quickly as possible, get it to that team, get someone assigned so that the customer knows they're being addressed as quickly as possible.
Okay. So do customers open tickets or do your techs open tickets?
Both.
Okay. And talk to me about the process that customers use and techs use to open tickets.
Internally, if you're a tech, you can go in and use the system itself, the ConnectWise system, and open it manually. Also, email connectors are built out so that if you're aware of an address, you can email that, and either it will go for an internal tech, it will go directly to the board you want because you're aware of that private email connector. But if you're a client, you're just doing it to a general bucket of triage.
Okay. So in our diagram, I just added an arrow going from M365 now to PSA, right? Because the email inbox is probably an inbox that sits in his M365. There's an integration between that inbox and PSA. So now we know that the mail piece has a critical component with the ticketing system. Now, if that went down, if the email wasn't responsive, they could still call, right? So, we're definitely going to be looking for anything that could relate to an outage that could cause issues with both of those systems. So we know it's VoIP, which means it's largely relying on an internet line at the MSP site. So if he has so I would ask Jerry, just curious, how many, talk to me about the internet service resiliency that you have at your MSP site.
So the site, we have multiple connections, multiple high-speed connections for failover and redundancy, but a lot of the techs work remote. So it would be residential connections that they rely on. So there would be less likelihood of a mass outage and more likelihood of individual outages.
Okay. And do all the techs largely rely on the same residential provider of?
No, they're
no?
geographically dispersed.
Okay. So in that conversation, we've just ruled out it's highly unlikely that there's an internet issue, but even if there were an issue with the internet at someone's home, they could always come into the office and there's redundant internet circuits inside the MSP site.
Depending on where they live. Some people are local to an office somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So we've ruled that out. All right. Have you had any experience with the ticketing system being unavailable for any reason in the past?
Not too many outside of routine maintenance windows that are scheduled.
Okay. That ticketing system sounds like it's essentially the central nervous system of customer support and service delivery. If that system were to be unavailable to you for, let's say, 2 or 3 days, talk to me about what the business impact would be for you, and talk to me about what you think you would do to continue to try and provide an acceptable level of service.
It'd be fairly catastrophic for existing tickets because they're already entered into a system and you wouldn't have a way to access them and field them and work them. New tickets could obviously be written down on paper, put in OneNote, put in an email. I mean, there's a lot of ways that you could just digitize the requests that are coming in, although inconvenient, and then later convert them to tickets. But the existing ones, unless we had a mechanism for restoring to another cloud server or to another availability zone or something along those lines, anything that was previously entered would be hidden from us, effectively invisible.
Okay. Are you doing any sort of backup of the configuration or the ticket state of that ticketing system?
Yes, but with the backups, it's not in real time. So we would be, if we're backing up once a day, we would, depending on when the outage was relative to when the last backup occurred, we could be missing anything up to 24 hours worth of data.
Okay. And, from a business impact perspective, losing 24 hours worth of data, does that seem like, obviously it's not desirable, but is that something that would create a large adverse impact on the company, either from a process perspective, a customer satisfaction perspective, or other?
I think 24 hours would be, yes, that would be a large impact.
Okay. All right. So what we just learned is there is a sort of a backup strategy for that critical system. We don't yet know if he's ever exercised the restoration of a backup, so we don't know how much we can actually rely on that process. But we've also learned that his backups are not sufficient to meet his recovery point objectives in the BIA. And so, maximum tolerable downtime, maybe they could have a contingency where they work through, some other process somewhere on paper that might need to be designed if they don't have it yet. So you could, that's an area to dig into. But that would come up in your contingency planning. But you've highlighted a few key risks here already just in asking a few questions. So with that, I'll pause. I think we still have a half hour, right, Andrew?
It was actually at 4.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but if you want to kind of summarize where you'd go from here, Ryan?
I mean, we still haven't dug into HR systems, right? HR systems would be critical for understanding. Typically your HR system is going to be your system of record for who are your people that are going to be servicing those phone calls. That's going to give them a role inside of M365. That role may even make its way down to the endpoint, which is then part of the voice over IP system infrastructure. So there's a lot more stuff that you're going to get into here from a critical business perspective that's going to tie back to HR systems, which we never actually got to. But I think you'll notice, like, I was asking people, process, and technology questions as I was doing this. I'm analyzing for risk in both of those, and so you know me, I could talk probably a few days on this, so I'll yield it back to you, Andrew.
Yeah, no. What I took away from yours and in particular, and Brian's too, but what I really like, Ryan, is it's almost Gary's really good at this, is and knowing that you're not in sales, but you're like you went to Jerry and you're like, well, when was the last time you were down? Did you have and like you're not sitting there, I don't know, interrogating him. You're having a conversation with him, and you're listening. What I picked up on, and Brian, and this is where we all, again, as MSPs, we have such an opportunity to differentiate ourselves. If you can get the kind of questioning and ears that you and Brian and Jerry have all articulated today, is to go, wow, that he said this, that didn't line up with what he originally said, which means that's real. But it gives you this kind of lens to start to dig into more things and huge amounts of trust and that you care, like, about this company, not, hey, let's talk about your technology.
And if I could add to that, I think this is why, going all the way back to the beginning when we said, don't focus on a step-by-step checklist. Don't focus on a template. If you had gotten a template off the internet, most of it would have been an asset and software-based inventory, effectively, right? You'd inventory everything you have and what do you think its priority is, and that would have been it. But to your point, Ryan did an excellent job of actually digging into the different things, how they interconnect, asking follow-on questions. And this goes back to, one, the template's not going to be sufficient. And two, Ryan has to understand the business and technology to even know to ask those questions. Or when I give an answer, does it not resonate correctly with Ryan? So he pivots to something else. If you have no experience in this and you've been asked just to go fill out a template, you will simply ask what we said not to do at the beginning. Tell me what systems you have. Tell me what tech you have. And that will not be the same. The client will not get the same benefit out of that exercise as what's happening here.
Or worse, you're going to trust the inputs, and then the program you design for them is not actually going to be what they need.
Yeah. It's almost like Jerry made me think about how, as MSPs, a lot of times we're like, we want to get to the critical data. And our question to our client is, so where's your critical data?
Literally.
Literally.
Your critical systems.
The people doing the work we're humans, right? We gravitate to our comfort areas.
Right.
So if the person doesn't know this, hasn't done this, they're not going to step out of their comfort area and potentially look foolish in front of their client. But someone who's well-versed knows what to ask. And on the other end of it, even just in this persona, I can tell you, I would feel comfortable working with Ryan on this because he knows the questions to ask. So I feel like he's going to provide value and make me think of things I would not have thought of myself, as opposed to being a note taker, just interviewing me. Thanks, I'll jot that down.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, I'm just going to share one thing, and we lost a bunch of people, I know, at the top of the hour. But for those that want to stay around, I do have something I just want to share with you real quick. What's different about Write a Boom this year? Literally 120 seconds. All right. So for the first time, when Ryan, got with me, we did basically the journey, right, Ryan, where we have everybody in one room. We heard over the years to do some new stuff, direct feedback from the MSPs. This is our first year. We are actually going to do a full tech track and a full business track. The tech track is led by John Strand and 6 former or current SANS instructors. This is hands-on keyboard, 2.5 days of different types of content and training for your technical folks, SOC analysts, sysadmins, etc. And then if you're an executive, business owner, anybody that's touching revenue and client facing, and this is where Jerry's track's going to be, building a BCISO practice. We have an entire business track all around driving revenue and success in the business and building new business practices. Our keynote speaker is the infamous and awesome Brent Adamson. If you've ever heard of the book, The Challenger Sale, this is the man. ConnectWise is going to be doing a Wednesday evening event with Brent on a fireside chat on the Challenger Sale, and the main keynote is all around his new book and upcoming work on customer confidence, 5 years in the making. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have taken that down so quickly. So the offer, by the way, we have a special offer for you guys right now. The early bird is $550 through the end of this month. We are, because you invested time today, you can sign up for $500, so $50 additional off the early bird through the end of tomorrow. If you use code BIA Workshop 500. So that is all I wanted to share. First off, I wanted to thank all of our attendees for hanging in there. This was awesome. I really appreciate the time you guys are investing. We're always trying to make a difference for MSPs. Now, gosh, Ryan, we've been 5 years in the making with the cyber call and all the different workshops we've done over the years. I appreciate all you've done for the channel and for everything. Appreciate again all the attendees. Jerry, thank you for coming on, role playing, acting as the MSP and sharing your perspective. And Brian, really appreciate your input and sharing out the template. And as we learned from both you and Jerry, the template is simply a tool. It is not where it's a guide. But if you need the template, reach out to me. I put the URL in there as well. So on behalf of Write a Boom and all the folks here, wishing you an awesome week ahead. Join us next week, next Wednesday, as we do the follow-up to this, which is the Modernizing IR Planning Workshop. So until then, everybody have an awesome day and take care, everybody. Thanks.